That's really interesting. So definitely stylistically, immediately, we have something very different. We have definitely a more retracted false folds here, open throat, right? I mean, that is so open. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful technique. Now, conversely, if we look at Ariana, so what she's doing is that her false folds are a little bit neutral. What I mean by neutral is if I'm just talking like this, I'm talking like this, and it's very speech quality. That's kind of where, for the most part, Ariana's false folds are right. But this is a continuum, right? But speech, that's kind of what she's going for, and I think that's safe to say. On the other hand, with Mariah, you have full retraction, and that gives it that deeper, richer, more mature quality. If I were to do it, I'll do some jazz stuff, just so you can see the difference here. Poets often use many words to say a simple thing. Very, 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 very dramatic difference. Very. That's interesting. Mariah's low notes kind of just vanish. But Ariana, with her low notes, she's kind of shoving down the larynx a little bit. And that's interesting because what we end up having is two different choices, right? Mariah could lower her larynx to get more of a low sound, but that has consequences. Like, it's not necessarily bad, it's just you have to make adjustments after the fact. While with Ariana, right, she's lowering the larynx and she's rounding out and protruding the lips, and all of that expands the vocal tract so that the sympathetic resonance of that frequency, right? If you're singing a note, the bass note is a frequency. The frequency we call B flat 3 in this case. So when you want to highlight B flat 3, it helps to adjust your vocal tract. That's very similar to something like, like if you change the amount of water in a thing, how it changes the pitch. That's because you're initiating, you are exciting the space within that, and so even just the breath makes a sound. So it's very similar, right? She's adjusting her vocal tract to adjust for the resonance, and she's doing that by making it larger, right? Lower larynx, protruded lips, and it's a clever way to go about that. It has its own sound, but it's a clever way to go about that. Mariah's just not doing that. But that's hard to hear. Ooh, wow. Okay. One of the things we're seeing here is, and I think this is cool, we're seeing analog recording versus digital recording, right? When Mariah was 28, it still had a lot of options for analog. But with analog, you don't have the clarity that digital has. So when you hear Ariana's, it's crispy, right? It's more present, it's clearer, it's easier to hear. Lacks a lot of the warming qualities that come with analog. But in terms of comparing note for note, I would say that this is not really a fair fight, just because of how the recording technology has changed. But who cares? Because I like hearing good singing. Wow. That went up, and I'm not sure if it was the tuning. Hold on. I think these are different tunings. I don't think that's a half step. It seems like a quarter step. That's the same. I love this one from Mariah, where she's like, who needs to breathe? Who needs oxygen? Not her. So that's a perfect example of, you know, audio quality giving one person an unfair advantage versus another, right? That's really interesting. So what I see here in the middle for Mariah is a little bit of a compromise. What I mean by that is, listen to it, is that there's a little bit of tension to achieve a straight tone. And the reason why that's useful and it's not so bad, the reason why that's not really that bad, is because she's taking what she's already doing, which is, you know, a thyroid tilt, very, very open throat, right? And she is taking that and adding just a touch of tension in a part of her range where there are not consequences for that. The tone changes. It might feel just a slight bit uncomfortable, but it doesn't, well, hold on, it's fighting us over here. Well, that's a close-up. But it doesn't affect her technique and her longevity for the set. But it also means she doesn't have to switch a bunch of shit right off the bat. As where we have Ariana, where she doesn't need to do that to achieve straight tone because she's not using a lot of thyroid tilt. She's not trying to go for the same open sound. So it's interesting that, like, the little different consequences. Oh, I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Oh, yes. So again, what we have here is an example of totally different styles. What Mariah is doing to get that gritty tone is she's kind of like, and this might like just absolutely terrify traditional thinking of singing, but this is how it's done. If you hold your breath, your false folds come together. They do that to close the throat. But if during that motion to close your throat, you kind of stop before it totally closes, then your false folds are together. Now, what that allows to do in the case of Mariah is it gives it a little bit of a fry and tension, and it's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to do because you have to be very gentle with it. It's so inefficient, and it's remarkably difficult. I challenge you, exhale everything, and then hold your breath, and try to make a sound. Like, it's very hard. It's very hard. So, I love it. I need to take a brief moment for my dog. Well, it looks like we're filming this way because my dog doesn't want to leave. That raspy sound comes from the false fold thing I was talking about. Oh, look, now okay, that's... That's very interesting. So that's Ariana doing that right now with that false fold thing. That. Now it's interesting that Ariana's doing a lot of this, like, that kind of like vocal drop, and it's definitely becoming more popular. Traditional logic would say that that's not good, but it's an aesthetic. Yo, real quick, I actually got to give props to Ariana. This music is really interesting and fun to listen to. I love a good drum fill. Like, that's, come on, that's just really satisfying right there. I admire this ability right here. So that this is what I meant, like false folds contract and retract on a continuum, right? So it's really interesting to hear the back and forth and how quickly she can go between it. Ooh, and that's cool too. Okay, so that one is actually, it's not a false fold thing, but it has kind of a similar effect on. So that's basically an umlaut, right? So that's what's called vowel modification. So if I go right, and I have that, if I have that full sound, I can use an umlaut to kind of make it a little bit more round and kind of, sorry, Anya, and kind of like bring it back a little bit. So it'd be oh, right. Obviously, I can't stop the opera, but it's dope. That's the technical term, y'all. It's dope. Oh, okay. That's interesting. So we're seeing more retraction of the false folds from Ariana there. Presumably, we're going up in range and register, right? So that would make sense that that's something she's doing. Mariah is playing with that range of motion as well, but it's very, very different. This is what I love about singing, is that there's, it's a shame that there's a lot of sentiments out there that are so rigid. Like, this is why I love singing, is that there's so many different ways to do it, right? And on this channel, we've never covered metal screaming, right? We've covered beatboxing, we've covered, different styles, even like rock, right? So I mean, I don't know. I love excellence and the ability to achieve something like this is really, really astounding, I think, and in completely different ways. That's very difficult. That's extremely difficult to do. Right now, so the false fold thing we talked about before, she's sustaining on that for an entire phrase. Very, very hard. I love this one. I think it's probably also worth mentioning. I think Mariah just either just simply has a bigger voice or is going for something entirely different. Anyway. Okay, hold on. I gotta tell you, it takes a lot for someone as white as me to kind of bop my head, like I gotta be careful listening to this stuff because I might hurt myself shaking those hips. So this is also like super interesting. So like And that dynamic range, the continuum that these false fold contractions can exist on, like she's still putting it up there, but it's clearly a lot less. And so the reason why I'm bringing that up is because it means she has a lot of control over where her false folds are and adjusts it according to her range. That is my dog licking her chops. It's hard for most people. It's hard enough to get your straight technique. You're singing without any tomfoolery, and to go throughout your range, right? That's difficult enough. But to also be able to do it on like this kind of false fold contraction stuff is really, really cool. Okay. Man, it's no F5 is the same, right? It's really, really, really cool. And I love the way that, like, she's not trying to, like, you can make you, right? Like, that would be, I think, kind of pretentious. What she's doing is it's like you're saying you can do it, right? She's punching the pronouns. And you don't generally want to punch the pronouns, but in this situation, it makes sense. I want to give a brief shout out to Queen of Lambley, because these super cuts are really well done. They're cross-faded. There's a lot of thought behind them. So, and the person who runs that channel gave me their blessing to use a lot of this stuff. So I appreciate that. That's really hard to hear. I will say this just because I know it's going to happen. There's nothing wrong with auto-tune. Auto-tune, T-Pain made it an aesthetic, but also just in general. I think it's weird to, say like, oh, you should never use auto-tune. Like, as you're getting better at singing, you will need it less and less as a tool, but you shouldn't have to wait 10 years to, sing. It's totally fine to use it. It's right there. It's readily available. I think it's worth talking about what head voice is here. So there's always like a big argument over head voice, and it's completely unnecessary. I think it makes more sense to understand head voice as a continuum, right? There are a lot of moving parts, and they can move within a certain amount of range, right? Just there, when we were listening to Mariah, there was almost like a belt equality, and then she kind of reined it back. And what that does is the folds, the actual folds, will adjust slightly. Even so, falsetto would be completely open, right? These are my definitions. If falsetto is completely open, then head voice is where there's any connection here. So you have any connection, any like ratio of connection between the false or vocal folds and the false folds. We discussed that as well. The contact between the two vocal folds, there's a range of motion there. The idea is that when you're doing head voice, it's like, what do you call head voice? Is it the folds are this close together, this close together, this close together, right? And what's cool about this edit, again, shout out to Queen of Lambley, is that you're hearing a lot of different versions of head voice, and it's super cool, and I'm glad to see it. And and I imagine in the comments, everyone's going to be like, "There's not." You know what? Go ahead and make the comments. It boosts my signal engagement anyway. Okay, Anya. Okay, I know. You got a butt. Yep, and you're rubbing it against me. That's a thing you do. Whoop. Ooh. So what is happening there is, well, first of all, my face is disappearing. So just like when I talked about, vocal folds and how close and how much of them are together, it changes when you do a tilt. So there are two pieces of cartilage that you can tilt. For the most part, this is like, let's not get into the, if you're like a super anatomy person and you know about this, like, let's not try and advocate for the unknown. For right now, mentally, it makes more sense to say cricoid can tilt, and that's what we're going with because we're trying to teach people to sing. So, shame on you if you become an a-hole about it. So, hey, Anya. Okay, no, I see you. Okay, all right. So the idea behind a tilt is that it'll change the vocal folds, okay? If you're doing a cricoid tilt, the cricoid tilts and makes the folds fatter, which is what belting is, but also is why belting is so dangerous if you don't do it right. It'll build up pressure, whoop, bam, right? And that's what happens with the cricoid tilt. So you have to be like an expert with breath. And again, we went over this and how to practice this. More on that at the end of the video. On the other hand, the thyroid tilt is your more classical approach, and that's what we just heard from Mariah, right? I give my all, right? As I untilt, putting aside that I just butchered that because why opera? I don't know. It's all I know. Well, it's what I know best. But anyway, digress. I'm rhyming over here. Digress, impress. Maybe I can make a career as a rapper. Might give it a shot. You don't know. But in that example, you can hear how as I untilted, the sound was not as loud. And that's because as the folds stretch with a thyroid tilt, there's more pressure that can build up without having the folds flip open. And the same is conversely true for the cricoid tilt, right? That's what I mean when I say that, like, just the standard definition for head voice is extremely misleading because there's a lot of factors here. I think it just leads to confusion, but that's me because I'm such an anal retentive technician. We got another question from a YouTube member who wants some advice on their singing. Let's give it a really quick listen and see what we can do here. So first of all, we gotta say no karaoke reverb. Okay, we're not going to do that. So that's my first piece of advice. And I know this person, so I can be a little joking like that. What we're going for here, what it sounds like you're going for, is a very lush sound, but you're doing it in a way that makes singing quite a bit more difficult. So, as the pretty and as he grins, there's a little bit of I'm super exaggerating it, but there's a little bit of a swallowed quality here. What I would do is I would personally do an exercise where you are sitting with a cup of coffee or you're sitting with a cup of tea, something that you like and is comforting to you, and you smell it, and that will retract the false folds, and then you can sigh. As you do that, you'll start to develop a sense of, okay, this is how I get a more thick sound, is doing this, right? And so on that sigh, you now can add vocalizing, right? Ah. Now the second thing that's getting in your way here is the tongue. Your posture is, you're doing this a little bit. I can hear it. The reason I can hear it is because if you're doing this, there's a muscle that connects to the larynx that goes down towards the scapula. And so if you're doing this, what you're doing is you're contracting that muscle, which brings your soft palate and your tongue and all of that down. So I could say do to fix your tongue tension, but I don't think that solves your problem, because what the problem is your posture. So what I would do is I would maybe just go on a treadmill and go on a walk and, sing while you do it or hum while you do it. I don't think yoga is like a catch-all. On my TikTok, I have a stretch here that I'll show you. Okay, here we go. This is one of them. So what you're going to see here is this time lapse is going to show what the difference in posture is, right? So on the left, different posture. On the right, you can see there's a difference between the back of the neck being craned, and also how close the shoulder, the traps. That's what I'm going for. So over this time lapse, you can see that my breathing, I'm able to take a bigger breath here. And so that's one thing you can do. You can meditate. The other thing is the stretch that I have on my TikTok. I'll bring that up too. Anya, chill. My dog is having a time right now. Rude and not letting me in. But the idea is just to sit down on a couch where your knees are just slightly below your hips, and then you just go in between your legs and you stretch there and you breathe there. And if you go to my TikTok, it's the first video that I posted on my TikTok, and you'll see the time lapse and just how effective and how much space you can get when you do that stretch, and how dramatically the scapula can release. I think it's pretty rad, and clearly I'm the authority on cool.